Hi, fourth graders. I hope you're having a fantastic Friday and you're ready to go for our next language class. So, here's what you're going to need for today's language. You won't need your language book. What you will need is a pencil and a piece of paper. If you need to pause the video now to go grab those supplies, please press pause. Hopefully, we're all set to go with our pencil and our piece of paper. What I'd like for you to do on your piece of paper is write on that day 1, 2, 3, and day 4. You can pause the video. Okay. By now, we should have our piece of paper, and on that piece of paper, it should be labeled day 1, day 2, day 3, and day 4. You can even take your piece of paper and put it in quadrants if you like. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and ask you some questions for each of these days. The questions that I asked for day 1 is going to be coming from our first video lesson. And when I ask you a question in this day 1 quadrant, I would either like for you to put a check mark if you answered that question correctly, or if we missed it, put an X. So every question that I ask will either get a check, Mrs. Evans, I've got it, or an X, ooh, I don't have it, okay? I will let you know when it's time for us to move to a different day or to a different quadrant, okay? Pencils ready? Day 1, here we go. The first question is this. On our first day of language together this week, I told you about the 3 different kinds of verbs. What kind of verb helps out the main verb? If you said helping verb, good job, put a check mark. If you said anything other than helping verb, put an X for day 1. Next question. What kind of verb tells what the subject does? If you said action, put a check mark. Anything else, put an X. Next question. What kind of verb tells what the subject is and connects it to another word in the sentence? If you said linking, good job, put a check. Another thing that we talked about on day 1 was tense. What does tense mean? If you answered time, put a check mark. Anything other than time, or maybe you weren't really sure at all, put an X. How many tenses does the English language have that we've talked about so far? If you answered 3, good job for you, put a check. If we answered any other numbers, put an X. What is the tense that means it's happening right now or it's continuing to happen? Present tense. What is the tense that says it has already happened? Past. What is the tense that says it is going to happen later? Future tense. Next question, and we're still on day 1. Next question. What helping verb is always with a future tense verb? If you answered will, give yourself a check mark. Good job. Nicely done. We're moving on to day 2, our next quadrant. Day 2's lesson was about the present tense verbs and how to spell them correctly. Here's your first question for day 2. If you have a singular subject, what kind of verb must you have? If you answered singular, give yourself a check. Anything other than that, please place an X in the day 2 quadrant. If you have a plural verb, what kind of subject must you have? Plural. They both have to match. Good job. Singular verbs end in what? S. If a word ends with an SH, what do you add to the end to make it singular? ES. Can you give me something else that if a verb ends in these letters, you would need to add an ES at the end? If you answered S, CH, SH, X, or Z, you are correct and give yourself a check. When do we change a Y to an I and add ES? If a consonant comes before the Y. Okay, that was day 2. Move on to our day 3 quadrant. Day 3 was about past tense verbs. For most verbs, if you are going to show that they are past tense, what do we need to add to the end of that word? ED. If you answered ED, put a check. Anything other than ED, put an X. If a word ends with an E, if an action verb ends with an E, and we are trying to make it into the past tense, what do you need to do? Drop the E and add ED. Third question. At what time do you double the final consonant before you add the ED? If you have a vowel and a consonant side by side in a short word and the vowel says it short sound, you would double the consonant and then add an ED. At what point would you change the Y to an I and add an ED? If a consonant comes before the Y. If you have a word that ends in Y, but you just add an ED, what do we know about that word? We know that in that word, the letter that would come before the Y must be a vowel. What are all of the vowels? A, E, I, O, U. Those are our vowels, all 5. Now, let's go to day 4. How you doing with your checks and your X's? Day 4. If I were writing a story about something that happened during World War II, what tense would I use in my story? Past tense. If I'm writing about something that's happening during our time, what tense would I use? The present tense. If I were writing a story that was a fictional story, a story that I was making up, what tense would I use? Past tense. Last question. When you're writing a story, what should you avoid doing? Changing tenses, starting out a story in the past tense and switching some of your verbs to the present tense, and vice versa, the other way around. You would never switch from tense to tense in a story when you're writing. Okay, now, Mrs. Evans, why did you have us make the checks and the X's? The checks and the X's. Okay, great question. Here's what I would like for you to do now. Look at your quadrants, and I want you to see which quadrant had the most X's for that day. Was it day 1, day 2, 3, or day 4? Whichever day had the most X's, I want you to now go back to that day and re-watch that lesson, okay? Today's lesson is going to be really short because it's just a review day. So it's not going to be our regular 15 minutes because I'm giving you some time to go back and review the day that we need a little bit extra practice on. If for any reason that you are not able to complete any of the 4 independent pages that I assigned for you, now would be the perfect day to get those done. Okay, I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Remember to keep circling any questions that you have for me or write them down on your question log sheet, and we'll get all those answered for you on our next FaceTime together. I love you guys. I miss you, and I can't wait to see you on Monday. Bye-bye.